What I'd like to do actually is to bring all of our lovely speakers who are still dialed in at this precise second in time to the fore. And if you've got a question that is appropriate or relevant with regards to what Nicholas was saying, or if you'd like to share with us anything that you've heard during the course of the last few hours that either surprised you or you vehemently disagreed with, or something that gave you a bit of an aha moment, now would be a good time to share that. I'm going to start with Jocelyn, because I saw you getting ready by putting your glasses on the top of your head. So at least you weren't staring at the ceiling, kind of going, no,
Yeah.
that's me. So Jocelyn,
Well,
perhaps if I come to yourself first, and then I'll go to Miran.
I'd like to pick up on one of Nicholas's comments, and I just put it in the chat too, because I think, we have this vast proliferation at the moment of ESG reporting standards, voluntary codes of conduct, protocols. And I guess one of the things I've been thinking about, and I feel a little worried about, is it almost seems as if the financial investment industry came to the ESG party a little bit late. Like, I think there's a lot of us who have, we're basically sweeping the floors and putting the chairs up on the table. And we're like, okay, great, good to have you at the table. But it feels a little bit as if ESG reporting has become very focused on kind of the outputs. And, then there's this big debate about, is it relevant? But I think if we look at ESG as the three traditional pillars of that leg stool of sustainability around social, environmental, and governance performance, we really should be looking for ways to see that ESG reporting is linked to what Nicholas said, this idea about sustainability impact. So it's less about outputs and more about impact for long-term sustainable development. So I thought that research work that was being done in Latin America was super interesting.
Awesome. Thanks, Jocelyn. Nicholas, do you have any response to that or any thoughts? And then I'll bring Anne into the discussion for her aha moments or disagreements.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the conundrums that I think we also discussed last year on the conference. Like, the investor and off-taker world is essentially built around comparability, right? So they want indicators that compare how the project is doing in one place to the other. But the contexts are so different that maybe water intake matrices are very relevant in the Salar de Atacama because it's very dry and they don't have much water. But the incentive in, let's choose another location, like a water-rich mining region in Colombia, that there the efforts should be placed on something different, right? So how to create an incentive framework for investors and off-takers that takes those context specificities into account, I think are very challenging. And at the moment, they're not designed that way. I don't have a solution to that yet, but I think it's worthwhile to put more effort on the context specificities, on the demands of the local stakeholders in the region of what is needed. And you also see that in the mining companies themselves, that often the reporting department is completely detached from the local community support department. So I think that's an area where a lot of work needs to be done.
Thanks, Nicholas. And I think to that as well, we're seeing in organisations that have got nothing to do with mining, so in other sectors, this sort of rise of required sustainability focus through the financial route sometimes is now putting that sustainability reporting in the accountants departments, which is totally separate from the real world. And I say that with much love and respect to accountants. Miran, I said that I was going to come to you next, and then we'll go to Anne. My apologies for mucking that up. But Miran, what do you think?
I don't want to be controversial, but from my experience, I think that the governments are going to be using the national security issue a lot more to basically give companies, I would say, I won't say carte blanche, but a more free pass from all the reporting and expectations that they have to do. So I think it's something that we have to be prepared for that, and not to be too idealistic that the world is a perfect place where all this can kind of coexist together. One thing that I came across from the OECD forum on the integrity and anti-corruption was that the companies or the private sector are much more keen to look at the risk life cycle management as a test rather than the due diligence element, because the due diligence seems like a checking the box, which doesn't really give you an insight how much risk you're going to be exposed through the relationship you have either with the community supplier or a partner in place. It's that relationship as it evolves and how they measure how basically the risk pans out through that relationship is going to be much more productive to say rather than the due diligence checking the box element. So I think focusing on the risk more than the due diligence could be more prudent, and basically start thinking how the whole geopolitical environment is going to diminish a lot of these good ideas and voluntary standards and guidelines, and it's going to be a very different world than we had in maybe the last 10 years.
Thank you very much for that, Mirren. And yeah, no, well, as someone who does lots in the world of risk, but of course seeing it both as the threat, but then also the potential opportunity, because we like to be happy and smiley every so often, is a very, very good point. Anne, how about yourself? And then we'll go to Glenn.
Well, yeah, so many thoughts from partly just following up from those comments. Some of these things are already embedded in some companies, and I don't see them shifting away just because governments give them a pass, as it were. There are issues on the ground with local people, and the company will be irrespective of what the national government says or doesn't say. And I don't see some of our groups. Now, some will. So we're a very diverse industry, right? And we're actors of all varieties. And so it's very hard to kind of broad brush the whole situation. And going back to something Jocelyn was saying, and I was arguing in the chat about the automation versus, community kind of thing. I'm such an optimist that I do see it all as a rosy outcomes. And I go back to reading a piece about the miners, one of the Boliden's mine, being queried about how they worried about, would you lose your jobs with automation? They said, no, we'll be fine. We'll be taken care of. So the relationship there between the company and the local people and the miners is such a positive one that they viewed it as creating a safer life for themselves, a better life for themselves. And I do see communities with technology is not the answer to everything, but the ability for us to sense data, to monitor mine sites, to do all of these things, then the local community can have ownership of that data and can see it in real time, what's happening in their mine site. So I see lots of positives from that. And yeah, other than that, I like what Glenn said.
And on that note, what a beautiful segue, Anne. Glenn, do you have any final words of wisdom for us? And I'm going to ask you to unmute if that's okay, because my lip reading's not that great.
You must improve that, Sarah, for
I know, my
future performance. What Mirren said is very, very insightful and worrisome, because as we have more and more drivers around critical minerals and urgency associated with them, you're going to create more and more risk on the ground. The conflict is going to intensify at ground zero, and that's where the real issue is going to arise, because governments can't control that. They can't control that any more than they can control the riots going on in American universities at the moment. There's just a limit to what regulars, and the reality is that there is inevitably a conflict between the straight line thinking of a government processing process or an engineering timeline, because if you want to go fast at the beginning, you're going to create more and more friction at the bottom, because people think slowly. You need more time to build a relationship at the front end, and that'll increase the trajectory going forward. But if you don't go slow at the beginning, you're going to get into much more difficulty on the ground. So the risk dimensions on the ground zero are going to be affected by all these drivers. And just on one final point, this whole ESG has just become a world where what gets counted counts. The tail is wagging the dog. We've created yet another monster. We've gone through many acronyms and many monsters that we've created from the basic understanding that Brundtland brought us to. What sustainability was all about, intergenerational equity, the basic balancing that has to happen. We've got all muddled up with all these acronyms and stuff that doesn't mean anything, quite honestly, at the ground zero. They don't just get it, nor should they. Anyway, that's my outrageous thoughts for the day.
We're all allowed our outbursts, Glenn, and absolutely there is a whole load of spraff that's out there that, to be honest, doesn't mean very much. And actually trying to cut through it and understand, okay, well, actually, what's the point? What's the change that we're trying to see? Where are we seeing that those communities are truly being empowered, and we're making sure that everything is moving forwards in that positive direction? It doesn't matter what words we use, it is that action that is required. So I think with that, everybody, thank you so much. It is a true honor for both myself and the rest of the Responsible Raw Materials team. Absolutely brilliant session. Thank you very much to all of our fantastic speakers. Thank you. And it just leaves me to say, that's the end of session 7, which means, everybody, it's session 8 tomorrow morning, which is the last one. Oh my goodness me, look at all of this. It's quite neat, actually, to be honest, what we seem to pull out the hat every year, because we only organize it in a couple of weeks. So well done, everybody. And for those of you, especially those of you in Vancouver, thinking 8 a.m. UK time, do I stay up really late?
No.
Do I? I mean, it might be more fun. I don't know.
That's what YouTube's for.
That's what exactly. That is what YouTube is for. So what you will find when you guys wake up tomorrow morning and you're sitting there with that beautiful cup of coffee or orange juice or whatever the case might be, reveling in the fact that you live in a beautiful part of the world, then have a think about checking in on some of session number 8, so the final session of this year's conference. Again, we've got an awesome lineup with even more perspectives coming to the fore. It's been a true joy working with all of you today. Thank you very much, and have a lovely rest of your Thursday. See you all tomorrow. Thank you very much.